April 1945, Bavaria, Germany. A German nurse walked into an American command post, alone. No escort, no appointment, no authority to be there at all. The soldiers at the entrance stopped her. She asked for the commanding general. They looked at her. She was in a German nurse's uniform. She had walked 3 miles through occupied territory to get here. She looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. She asked again, "I need to speak with General Patton." They brought her to an officer instead. She sat down across from him. "I have 43 German wounded," she said, "and 11 American wounded who were left behind when the line moved. They are in the same building. They are all running out of time." The officer looked at her. "We have no medicine," she said. "No bandages, no morphine, nothing. I have been keeping them alive with what I could find in an empty farmhouse. That was 4 days ago." She put her hands flat on the table. "I am not asking for myself. I am asking for 54 men who will die this week if nobody comes." The officer sent her to his superior. His superior sent a report to Patton. Patton read it that afternoon. He read it once. Then he said 3 words. "Send a truck." What came out of that depot the next morning was not what anyone expected. Before we get into what happened next, if you want more untold stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button. It was April 17th, 1945, 20 days before Germany's surrender. The Third Army was moving fast through Bavaria, and the chaos it left behind was the particular kind that comes from speed. Towns taken, lines moved, situations left unresolved because the advance couldn't stop for every situation. German units dissolving, civilians in the way of everything, supply systems trying to keep pace with a front that refused to stay in one place. In a school building outside the town of Moosburg, a German nurse was doing something that had stopped making medical sense 4 days ago and hadn't stopped being necessary. Her name was Margareta Bauer, 34 years old, from Munich. She had trained as a surgical nurse at a hospital in Munich before the war and had spent 4 years in military hospitals, moving with the front as it went east and then came back west. She had seen what war did to the human body in a volume that would have broken most people. She had not broken. She had found that the way through it was to keep moving, keep working, keep the next patient in focus rather than the accumulation of all of them. The school building had become a makeshift hospital when a German field unit set it up 6 weeks earlier. As the front collapsed, most of the staff had left, some ordered to retreat, some simply gone. The patients who could walk had mostly walked. What remained were the ones who couldn't. 43 German soldiers too badly wounded to move, and 11 American soldiers who had been captured during a firefight 3 weeks earlier, treated alongside the Germans because there was nowhere else to put them, and then left behind when the German unit retreated. By April 17th, Bauer had been alone in the building for 8 days. She had 1 medical kit, depleted. She had water. She had food from a farmhouse down the road that she had cleared out 4 days ago. She had no morphine, which meant the men who needed it most were managing their pain with what remained after 4 days of rationing, an amount that had never been enough. She had kept 54 men alive through sheer continuity of attention, moving from bed to bed, changing dressings with whatever cloth she could find, monitoring wounds that were beginning to turn, talking to men when she had nothing else to give them. She understood by the morning of April 17th that this was ending. Not because she was going to stop. Stopping was not something she was going to do, but because the arithmetic of what she had versus what the men needed had reached a point where intention alone could not close the gap. She needed supplies. She needed medicine. She needed help, and there was only one place nearby where those things existed. She walked 3 miles to the American command post. She had no way of knowing if they would help her. She was a German nurse, walking into an American facility, asking for supplies for German wounded. The 11 Americans in her building were her best argument, and she intended to make it clearly. She had never been inside an American military facility before. She walked up to the entrance with her nurse's uniform on, and her identification in her hand, and she asked for General Patton. The soldiers at the gate did not bring her to General Patton. They brought her to Captain David Morris, the duty officer. Morris was 28 years old and from Massachusetts. He had been dealing with an unusually complicated morning before she arrived. He looked at the woman sitting across from him in a German nurse's uniform and listened to everything she said without interrupting. When she finished, he asked one question. How many American wounded did you say? 11, she said. They have been in my care for 3 weeks. They are alive. I would like them to remain so. Morris sent her to his superior. His superior read the report and sent it to Patton's headquarters. It reached Colonel Thomas Reed by early afternoon. Reed read it and took it directly to Patton. Patton read it once. He set it down. Send a truck, he said. Reed began organizing a standard medical supply delivery. Not a supply run, Patton said. A full truck, everything we can put on it. And I want a doctor on that truck. And medics. They don't drop supplies and leave, they stay until those men are stable. Reed looked at him. All of them, Patton said. German and American both. They're in the same building. They get the same supplies and the same care. The truck left the depot the following morning at 0600. The soldiers who Joe Parpern loaded it had worked through the night. Reed had given them a list and told them to fill it. It was not a standard supply run. It carried morphine, surgical supplies, bandages, plasma, antibiotics, full load assembled in 12 hours. It also carried Army Surgeon Captain Robert Ellis, 2 medics, and enough food to sustain the building for 2 weeks. Bauer had returned to the school building the previous afternoon. She had told the men that help was coming. Some had believed her. Some had been too far into their own situation to process what she was saying. She heard the truck at 0630. She had not slept. She met Ellis at the door before he had finished getting out of the vehicle. He looked at the building, a school, Red Cross symbol on the door she had painted herself 3 days ago. He looked at her. How long have you been here alone? He asked. 8 days, she said. He looked at her face the way doctors look at faces when they are making an assessment and have already reached a conclusion. They're not going to voice out loud. We'll start with the critical cases, he said. Walk me through them. They worked for 11 hours without stopping. Ellis and the medics moved through the wards with the systematic focus of people who have done this before in worse conditions. Bauer worked alongside them, not as an assistant but as someone who knew these patients better than any document could convey. She knew which men had been deteriorating fastest over the previous 4 days. She knew which wounds had been turning. She could tell Ellis things about each patient, the pattern of their fever, the way a particular wound had been changing, which men had stopped eating 2 days ago that had no source except 8 days of continuous watching. By evening, the situation in the building had shifted from critical to serious. Not safe serious. Not the same thing. And Bauer understood the difference precisely. Serious meant there was time. Critical had meant there was not. Ellis wrote his report that night. He included a detailed section on Bauer's management of the facility during the 8 days she had been alone. He wrote it in the spare language of medical reports, which made what it described more stark rather than less. The report went back to Patton with the medical update. Patton read it the following morning with his first coffee. He read the medical update once. He read Ellis's section on Bauer twice. Then he wrote a short note and had it delivered to the school building. It was addressed to Sister Margaretha Bauer. The men in your care were found in better condition than the situation warranted. That is a direct consequence of 8 days of work that was not required of you, and which you did anyway. This command is aware of it. It was signed by Patton, not by Reed on his behalf, by Patton himself. Bauer kept the note for the rest of her life. It was found among her papers, when she died in 1989, in a small envelope kept separate from everything else. The 11 American soldiers were evacuated to a proper medical facility within 48 hours of Ellis's arrival. All 11 survived the war. Several of them spent years afterward trying to find out the name of the German nurse, who had kept them alive for 3 weeks and then walked 3 miles alone to get them help. Most of them eventually found it. 3 of them wrote to her. She answered every letter. Colonel Reed, who had organized the truck and read Ellis's report and watched Patton write that note, spoke about it many years later. He said 3 words. Reed said, "Send a truck," and then he clarified what that meant: a full truck, a doctor, medics, everyone stays until the men are stable, German and American both. He paused. He didn't make a speech about it. He didn't explain his thinking. A nurse had walked 3 miles alone through occupied territory to ask for help for 54 men, German and American, all of them together in the same building, and he sent everything he could put on a truck and a doctor to go with it. That was the whole thing. But was Patton right to treat German and American wounded equally? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about World War II and the people who held things together when everything else was falling apart, make sure to subscribe.